Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Chloe. I'm a fourth year psych major, currently working as one of the senior event coordinators for the Economics Career Office. And this panel is going to be moderated by our director, Jen Jones.
Grace, could you start by introducing yourself, and giving us a little skim of your resume and career trajectory?
Sure. So, yes, UVA alumni. I graduated back in 2017, so 4 years ago. I'll tell you, feels like just yesterday. So I was an economics and media studies double major. So I always said economics was a really good way for me to flex kind of like the more math-oriented part of my brain that I was interested in, figure out how a business works, and then media studies, was a little bit more of the creative side. I was writing lots of papers and doing lots of analysis in that sense. So in college, I wrote for the Morning Brew. It was a financial newsletter that started, I think in like 2014 or 2015 or so. So I wrote for that. I started my own club called Autism Allies. Not sure if any of you guys have heard of it or if you're in it. If you're in it, let me know. That would be awesome. And then I also worked at the Virginian about 30 hours a week, I think. So hopefully a lot of you guys have been there. If you haven't, definitely go there and check out their mac and cheese. I still 4 years later dream about it all the time. But really loved the food and beverage industry. Throughout college, thought working at the Virginia, you'd see people come together after, not seeing each other for a while and get a beer. People would return on grounds and, bond over that. So really liked that portion of it. I had an internship where I did marketing and branding for different food and beverage companies in New York City. So everything from restaurants to a wine company to packaged goods, really all over the place, and loved the creativity that came with like a food and beverage type of brand. And it's something that everyone does, right? Everyone eats, everyone drinks something. You don't have to drink beer, but it's definitely an industry that all of us, by nature are a part of. So decided for full time, I wanted something in the food and beverage industry. I didn't know exactly what that was. I was really interested in all aspects of it, supply, logistics, HR, sales, thought everything was really great. So I applied for a more general program with Anheuser-Busch and ended up being routed through the interview process to the people trainee program, which we call HR people at Anheuser-Busch, which basically centers around everything. We work towards engaging employees, hiring, recruiting, exactly this kind of stuff that we're doing right now. Keeping talent, compensating talent, all across the board, working with leaders to become the best leaders we can, develop our skills, etc. So I did, when I first started, a 2-month project for our craft breweries. So we've got a whole bunch of craft breweries that we own. So did a project there to get all of our payroll systems on track. We had probably like 50 different payroll systems and we needed to have one. So figuring out what tool that was going to be. And then for a year, I worked in St. Louis, and I was a people generalist, or what we called people analytics for people supply. So essentially supported our supply leaders. So everyone who makes beer, who makes cans, who grows our barley, our hops, all the way up until the beer is packaged and out the door, help those leaders understand where we were at with our people. Were they engaged? Were they developing skills? How can we get the most out of them, hire the best talent, retain the best talent, et cetera. And I did that through numbers. So it seems like kind of a weird thing to apply numbers to people, but that was really my job there. So looking at turnover rates, how fast we're hiring people, engagement survey data, and finding insights to bring to that client group. So then after a year, I moved to New York City, and I was kind of a hybrid role between management systems specialist and the planning and performance management manager. So worked with our people package, which is basically every cost that comes with employing people. And for any company, that's going to be your biggest cost. It was lots of money. So working with all of our leaders there to make sure that we're budgeting the right amount, so that we're spending the right amount of money to help our business grow. And then the management system side was similar to what I was doing before, looking at KPIs and metrics for how we can fulfill our people agenda, but also looking how can we do things different within our routine? Are we looking at the right things? Do we need to be looking at other things? And then after a year of doing that, I moved down to Atlanta, where I work at our brewery in Cartersville. So we've got 12 breweries across the US. And here I was an assistant people manager. So kind of really pivoted. I decided I really wanted to grow my soft skills, do something really different. And so I'm an assistant people manager where I work with our labor union here, where we have the Teamsters. So essentially my day-to-day is managing conflict, any employee situation that arises, anything related to employment law. And then I also partner with the local business here. So working with the general manager of our brewery to determine, how can we continue to engage our employees, help them get the proper skills? How do we make sure that we have the right people in the right place at the right time to make sure that we can get as much beer out the door as possible? So that's where I'm at right now. Currently, we're kind of going through like a technological revolution in Cartersville as well. So we call ourselves the Brewery of the Future, where we're implementing all of this new technology to see, how can we manufacture differently? Is there anything that we can free up for our operators' time to help them problem solve and do things differently? So that's kind of where I'm in the midst of right now, and has been quite the journey, but have loved it so far.
Thank you so much. So many questions. We're going to let Colin introduce himself, and then we'll come back to those questions. And students, I want you to feel free to also add questions in the chat as we go. We can get to some of those if they are in reference to comments that our guest just made. So Colin, can you give us a skim of your experience? I know you just graduated in 2020. So yeah, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so how's it going, everyone? Colin Hanley, graduated from UVA in 2020. Prime pandemic graduation, as I'm sure you guys experienced as well. I was a double major in economics and computer science. So started off as just an econ major, sort of just always knew I wanted to work in business. Didn't really know what from there, but economics for me was how I figured it out throughout the curriculum, doing all the econ classes. Settled that I was interested in the analytics application of it and using analytics to make better business decisions, right? So that's when I added on computer science in the College of Arts and Sciences, to sort of bring that analytical background that, other people may not be bringing to these positions. And so that's how I settled on that. At UVA, I was involved with a couple of different organizations, did a lot with Madison House, various programs throughout the years. Would go to like a nursing home, bunch of different things. I was in Theta Chi fraternity, and I also, probably my biggest involvement was CASH, which is like the tax services to low-income families in Charlottesville. You just prepare their tax returns for them, which was awesome. That was one of my favorite things I did during my time at UVA. And in terms of work experience, I had my first like real internship after my second year. So I was working for Choice Hotels, big hotel company that owns a bunch of different brands that, Quality Inn, Comfort Inn, all those hotels that you see all around the country. And I was working on their sales analytics team. So I was a sales enablement intern, which meant a lot of different things. But honestly, the biggest thing I got out of an internship at that age was just, what is it like to have a corporate job, right? And that's what I took away from it. And then after that, I applied for an Anheuser-Busch internship the summer between my third and fourth year. It was called the Sales Trainee Program. So you work in a sales function for the summer. They give you a project on the sales team, and it's a 10-week program. And so I was placed in New York City for that program. It was basically like St. Louis or New York. I know that stuff changed all the time, but that was where pretty much everyone got put. So I was in the New York office, had a great experience. I had like a 10-week project to work on, but it was definitely more, like the project was my main focus, but a lot of it was just learning from different people within the company. What do you do? How does this business operate? Super helpful to me when I then, after the program, got the return offer and felt like I had already gotten my feet wet within the company, understood how things operated. My project that summer was it was this tool within Excel that I had never really worked with Excel prior to the internship the year before, but AB's less so now than I'm sure a couple of years ago, but still pretty reliant on Excel, particularly in my role. I built a tool in Excel that just you could select any geography, any package, all the way down to like how many 6-packs of Bud Light did we sell in this zip code. And that sort of already existed. And then my job was bringing a tool that you could see not only like the volume number, like how many cases, but we could also see revenue at the same time. So it was kind of just a big back-end project that I worked on in Excel, took the whole summer, super interesting, and learned a lot that summer. Came on full-time in the commercial trainee program, which, UVA is a big focused recruitment school for that program. And I did an 8-month training program there, where the original plan was 8 months, 4 different cities, 2 months each city, and you're going to do a different role and do 4 different things. And then by the end of it, you can say, hey, I really liked that city. You can say, hey, I really like that job, and then you'll go do it. Little different for me because we did it during COVID. So they didn't want us moving around a bunch, going to all these different cities, worrying about quarantining and everything. So I got one assignment, and they said, you're going to LA. And I said, okay, I got my car, drove out here. Didn't know anyone out here, but Anheuser-Busch is such a great place to work, in that like the people I work with became like my friends right away. They're very big on this culture fit of like, if you check all these boxes of things we're looking for, we're going to hire you, we're going to develop you, we will figure out a place for you. And they really do a great job, because everyone I meet at work is awesome. Love hanging out with them, inside, outside work. So came out here in October of 2020, so just under a year now. And I worked in one of our distributors, where when I was in the New York office, I was like top like a million miles above the ground of what the business actually does. But when I came here, I was like boots on the ground. Like I was going into grocery stores at 6 a.m. and writing their beer orders for them. Did that for 3 months. It was a humbling experience for sure. It definitely makes you appreciate the work that, the very, like I said, boots to the ground level is doing. And it was huge for me too, to actually have that understanding of like, go from all the way to the top to the bottom, like how those things all waterfall up and connect with each other. So did that for 3 months. And then I just did shadowing in a bunch of different programs, or a bunch of different departments within the distributor. Marketing, I did stuff with like our high-end profile, and a bunch of different things, and just learned what people did, which was super helpful. Then at the end of the program, my program ended in March. I came on full-time as a business analyst for the region team. So a couple people in our program moved around, but generally they kept us where we've been. So different office in LA, but still in the same city. And now my team is the sales intelligence team. So my job is basically analyzing the business as on an ad hoc basis of like people come to me saying, why are we selling more beer here and less beer here? Generally, it's basically what I do. I'm like sort of like an internal consultant. But then also just some routine reporting and stuff like that just help keep our stakeholders informed of what's going on in the business. So been doing this for like I said, since March, and love it. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be. And definitely feel like everything leading up to it prepared me very well for it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for taking us through your experiences from your time here at UVA to what you're doing now. We did have some students share with us their backgrounds. We have a lot of econ majors in the call. So a lot of people who are currently looking for internships and jobs, which makes sense because you all do have jobs posted in Handshake right now, multiple jobs. And in fact, you have the global management training position and the summer internship in those roles. And it sounds like you were both in that program. Is that right, Grace? You were in that as well?
So there's a few different programs. So I was a part of the people trainee program, which is specific to just HR. The global management trainee program is more broad. So you enter into it kind of being open functionally to, like sales, people, supply, logistics. And then I think what Colin was in, commercial trainee program, is more like sales and marketing. So we've got a bunch of different programs for really anything you want to do, any function or all of them. We have different programs for that.
Okay, great. So the title of this program is How I Got This Job. So we do want to get down to, really some strategic tips for our students. When Colin, you were going into your recruiting for Anheuser-Busch for the summer internship. Can you talk to us about what that recruiting process was like? And what do you think made you stand out? Now you're on the other side, so you also are looking at what makes people stand out. And I know, Grace, this is part of your role too. So that question to you also, what makes people stand out in their resumes before you even get to interviewing in their resumes? Yeah. Colin, can you start us off? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found out through the internship, or about the internship, through Handshake. Saw the posting on Handshake and thought it sounded cool. I was like, hey, I like beer. I like data analytics. Let me do them together. So I applied for the internship. Immediately, like the first step in that was I got an email with a culture fit test. So it was this like questionnaire you fill out online of just figuring out whether you generally fit the culture of Anheuser-Busch or not. Submitted that. 10 minutes later, I get another email saying, you passed. Now do this logical reasoning test. So kind of like a puzzle game type thing. Did that. A couple days later, got another email saying, all right, we're having interviews on grounds. It's a case study. So they present you with a business problem. They have you sit down, and 30 minutes later, you come back and give them the answer to whatever the question is. So did that. And then after that, there was just a behavioral interview. So just talked to two other people. They were both alumni from UVA. Just asking me about myself, like pretty standard interview, like strengths, weaknesses, that kind of stuff. And then the final round interview was a panel interview in the New York City office. So I was supposed to fly to New York. There was a snowstorm that week in Charlottesville, and my flight got canceled. So drove up to DC to get a train. Trains were sold out. Drove all the way to New York. Got there at 4 a.m. the day before my interview. But the panel interview was definitely, it was cool, but it was a little intimidating. The format was like, there was 4 of us on one side, 4 people being interviewed, and then there were 4 employees on the other side. It was like a conversation type thing. So they would just ask us questions, and then we'd all get on the line and answer, and we'd sort of talk about it and things like that. I think what makes people stand out in these interviews, and Grace might have more visibility in this too as well, being on the people side of things, but it's your ability to concisely explain things and be confident in what you're saying, and they're not looking for people that are like, I don't know the answer, but let me make something up. And I ran into one of those problems in my panel interview. Like I said, my travel plans got completely ruined by the snowstorm, and I didn't have as much time as I thought I was going to have to study everything for the interview. And they said to me, they asked me first, they were like, of our 10 principles on our website, which do you disagree with the most? And I was like, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if I could tell you a specific principle right now. I know that they're divided into 3 categories, and I didn't like try to weasel my way out of it. I just told them, I was like, so I don't really have an answer for that, but I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks. We moved on. And the next question that came, and this one, it's famous for flustering people. And so I'd kind of heard about it, but they were like, all right, there's 4 of you guys here. Say there's only 3 spots. And they pointed to this other kid, and they're like, who wouldn't you hire? And he said, I wouldn't hire Colin, because if I'm going to come all the way here for this interview, I'd probably be better prepared. And that was like one of those things of like, just maintain my composure. It's moved on with the interview. And I think that was what they were looking for, basically. Like, can you stay calm and keep going? And that whole thing of like being honest and being truthful about things, I think, is a big piece of things that make people stand out.
Really great advice. Thank you, Colin. Grace, any other thoughts you want to share about the recruiting process and who AB InBev or Anheuser-Busch is looking for right now?
Yeah. So Colin, like, definitely can say from the people standpoint, like, completely agree with everything that you said. I actually got asked the same question, so it's a famous question that we like to ask, right? But kind of like 2 things I would just say to stand out, and this is for not even just Anheuser-Busch, but for any company that you apply for going into it, is 2 things, is just be authentic. A lot of interviewers, whether they went to UVA or not, were in your shoes at some point. And a lot of times they can tell, kind of like Colin was saying, if you're making stuff up or if you're trying to be someone that you're not, which is okay. You know, we want people who are authentic and who will bring their authentic selves to work and who want to work for Anheuser-Busch because they want to work for Anheuser-Busch. And if you want to work for us, it will come out. You know, my favorite principle that we have, if you look on our website, we have 10 principles, is keep it simple, right? So don't overcomplicate it. You will find a job that resonates with you and resonates with your values and what you're looking to give out in the world. And so that goes for anything. And kind of on that point too, quality over quantity as well. So when you're looking at things in your resume, I know a lot of you guys are 3rd and 4th years. So you've got like some time, but you know, towards the end of the rope and in terms of like starting new things in college, but you know, be more involved in things that you're really passionate about and that really resonate with you versus being in like 8 different clubs that you could care less about. Because when you're going to talk about them in an interview or submit them on a resume, you want to have 2 or 3 things where you have like a decent amount of bullet points that kind of stand out, and you can come forward and say, yeah, I was the president of this club, or I, you know, didn't even have a position in this club. I just love, you know, pancakes for Parkinson's because I feel really attached to, you know, whatever the, you know, cause is or something like that. That means so much more in a resume, in an interview, than if you were involved in a bunch of things or even involved in fewer things that you're not passionate about, right? So if you go into an interview and say, I'm in, you know, this club, and they're going to ask you, you know, why are you involved in this club? And if you don't have, you know, an authentic answer, right? You tell them what you think they want to hear, they're going to know. So those would be, I think, my 2 pieces of advice.
Grace, I have a quick follow-up regarding this, and I'm not sure if this is something that you would be familiar with, but regarding those assessments, such as the culture fit and the logical reasoning, does everyone who applies for a corporate position, are they all given the same tests, or are those different based on the positions you're applying for?
Yeah, every employee takes the same test. So whether you're a corporate employee or if you're applying for a weekender position at, you know, the brewery, everyone takes the same test.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, this firm, and I'm not, you know, pitching one firm over another. It just happens to be that we had Grace and Colin together tonight. They were both available, but huge firm, right? Like 30% of, what is your market share? I mean, of the domestic market. I mean, really high, right?
Yeah, I think it's just under 50% nationwide.
Yeah. I mean, huge, right? And the beer industry, this is what I read a little earlier, $120 billion sold last year. You all have a huge percentage of that market. So lots of opportunity in your company to have different types of roles to move up within your career. So it is, you know, an incredible position to a place to start or a place to go later. We have another question from a student. Colin, can you talk about the transition from the commercial trainee program to being a business analyst? Is that typical, or do people go into different areas of the company?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty typical. My class for that program was 25 people, and I think we had 7 people go to become business analysts after. It's a pretty popular choice just because the role is pretty, it's a great place to start in that you get a very good understanding of the business at a low level. You know, it's an entry level job, but I see data about everything about the company. I mean, I guess mine is just our region, but like you get a very solid understanding, solid foundation in this role. So that's pretty popular. Other roles are sort of just up to you. Like I knew I wanted to be a business analyst just because they've got a really good mentorship program and everything. And I talked to people and decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I sort of networked my way internally to get there. But even if you do the commercial trainee program, you may start in your first role on the commercials. You know, commercial means sales and marketing for us. You may start in the commercial side, but after your first role, you might then decide, you know, sort of like Grace's career path where she sort of bounced around a lot. It's all about getting the right people into the company and then just follow your nose from there. Like they'll figure out, they'll work with you to figure out what you want to do and work across all different functions within the company.
Okay, great. Thank you. So speaking of networking, what kind of networking did you both do as you were applying for this position? And then internally, once you got there, Colin, you touched a little bit on this. Grace, I'm sure that you've done some internal networking to move around to different areas that interest you. Can you talk about that pre-employment and then once you're within the organization?
Yeah, so pre-employment, a lot of it, honestly, they helped us out with that during the interview process. I remember so like the on grounds interviewing, they had alumni there that were doing a lot of the stuff and they were leading it. So just making sure I was staying connected with interviewers and things like that, and sending your thank you emails and stuff like that, and then seeing if you can talk outside of it. I feel like people are very approachable and very willing to tell you about things if you were just proactive. So talk to a few different young alumni during the interview process, got their advice on things, wanted to learn more about things myself. So did that pre-interview. And then once I got into the company, it's sort of, like I said, you can sort of determine your own career path based on the connections you make and the relationships that you form. So I think the biggest advantage of doing one of these trainee programs like we did is, like I said, there were 25 people in my program that all just graduated college. We were all doing the same program. You get very close. And now I know 25 different people across the country that say, a lot of us have the same job, a lot of us don't. So I know about that role because my friend does it. And if I ever wanted to go do something like that, that's what I would talk to. You've got these automatic connections right away within the company. And like with all the other training programs too, it ends up being like, I don't know, 60, 70 people a year that are automatically in your shoes. So it's more of just keeping in mind what interests you and talking to those people in your everyday job. So that's what I would say in terms of internal.
Yeah, so when I started, or when I was interviewing, I actually had a couple people who were a year older than me that I knew that had worked or that were currently working at Anheuser-Busch. So called them prior to applying and, asked them about what the culture was like, or things they liked, what they didn't like. And then went through the interview process, and same thing, even when I interviewed, I guess in 2016, forever ago, they're really on top of staying in touch with you throughout the whole process, answering any questions. And then two, one of the things that I love about Anheuser-Busch as well is everyone's really friendly, and it doesn't matter what function you're even into. Like any single employee at Anheuser-Busch could email me, even if I don't know who they are, and say, hey, I really want to learn more about, the people team. What do you guys do? What do you like about your job? Can you connect me with anyone who, does XYZ? That's probably part of my nature, just as someone in people, trying to connect people with like their, career opportunities and, for their personal growth. But really anyone is like that as well. So I've had my own, career times where I'm like, maybe this will interest me. I want to learn more about this. And it doesn't even matter like where they are in the company. They're always willing to take 30 minutes to reach out to me and talk to me. So I know it can be kind of scary, just like taking the plunge sometimes and emailing someone who you don't know. But they love getting those kinds of emails, and everyone's really dedicated to like growing and developing our talent. It's something that I think we really pride ourselves on internally. So it's been a great experience.
So considering that, I don't believe that, should we call you AB InBev or Anheuser-Busch? What is the correct name right now? I've seen both. And
it's Anheuser-Busch.
Okay, great. So Anheuser-Busch is not on grounds this semester, as far as I know. Your jobs are posted, but because of COVID, many firms are not on grounds. If our students want to connect with alumni, what is the best way that they do this? As they're investigating, researching the firm, and then once they land an interview.
Yeah, so I just got an email actually like last week or the week before about the university recruitment process starting up again, and the people team, I guess there's a team dedicated to this. They keep track of who went where, and then they send you an email. So I got the email for all the UVA alum, and Grace, you probably did too, to set up that process. So I'll be involved in that process. I know we have plans. I reached out to find out exactly what they are, but didn't hear back in time for the panel for a virtual recruiting. So we won't be on grounds just because of COVID, but there is going to be a virtual recruiting thing for opportunities to talk with and meet up with alumni.
Yeah, I think we're still in like the very beginning stages. But anyone can always reach out to me as well, and I'm happy to connect you with any alumni. We've got alumni all across the board in so many different areas and functions and things like that. I'm sure there's at least someone, and if they're not an alumni, doesn't matter. I'll connect you with someone anyway. So definitely reach out to me if you have any questions or things like that as we're getting our materials together.
Okay, so after this event, for all the students who are here, we'll send you some follow-up information with contact information for Grace and Colin. Also, you all have an enormous presence on LinkedIn. So would you recommend that students maybe find some people on LinkedIn, alumni that way, and reach out to them through LinkedIn? Is that appropriate? What do you think? Sounds like you're a very, friendly, open firm.
Yeah, I would say so. And like Grace kind of touched on earlier, everyone's very excited to talk to people about their job because everyone's like very proud to work at AB. Everyone loves talking about their job because it's fun and exciting, So I don't think you reach out to anyone anyway, whether that's email or LinkedIn. I think it's totally appropriate. And I think you'll get a response either way.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open it up for students' questions now. I have many more questions, and it would also really like to hear more about specifics of our guest jobs, although they have told us some projects that they're working on. So why don't we now open the chat? Feel free to send questions in the chat. If you'd like to ask your question in person, I encourage you to unmute yourself, say your name, your year, and what you're studying, and go ahead and ask your question. We'll give everybody a few seconds to think about that.
Grace, I'm curious. I'm also creative, and I'm curious what elements of the sort of as a media studies major coming out of college, and then also in that program you mentioned like creativity and that being interesting to you. What specific like tasks were you assigned that really like stimulated that part of your brain, like got you going in the creative aspect of things?
Do you mean like in my current job or when I was at UVA?
In your current job, and also I think you mentioned maybe it was during the I can't remember which internship program, but I just remember you saying that like using the creativity element.
Yeah, for sure. So within people, one of the things that I like about it is, has anyone taken behavioral finance? Okay, so one of like the most influential econ classes that I took at UVA, if anyone hasn't taken it and has space or time, I don't know what semester it is, definitely take it, but you learn that people aren't rational actors, right? So you create all these economic models that say, okay, people will do X, Y, Z, and then, supply and demand will meet up and everything's great, except for when that doesn't happen, right? And that is usually how it goes. So people really lends itself to a lot of creative problem solving because you deal with trying to understand the mechanisms for how people work and how people make decisions. And everyone's very different. So I'd say like those are probably the creative elements where, you have to sit and ponder and really try and understand, how are people feeling? What motivates people? What programs can I create to help connect people to, their purpose at Anheuser-Busch? How can I use these different elements to come up with a solution that will, route people in the right direction? So I think it's usually like towards the end of the day too, my creative thinking is better where you like try and think about those kinds of programs. But yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah.
Looks like we have another question in the chat. What does a typical day/week look like in the trainee program?
Yeah, I could speak to mine as well as I know what the changes are for the one that actually the new commercial trainees start tomorrow. And I know there's another UVA alum that'll be starting in the program starting tomorrow, and so he gave me the outline of what they're doing this year. It's like a rotation program, right? So they want you to experience doing a bunch of different things. So that's the goal is to gain exposure. My typical day changed a lot over the course of the 8 months. But like I said, I was running a sales route for 3 months. So I was going into grocery stores, talking to the managers, trying to get our beer up on the displays, figuring out how many cases I needed to send them for the next week. That was a part of my program. That's what my days look like. There's another part of my program where my day was, I was shadowing the marketing department for the week. So whatever they needed, I was just sitting in on them and watching what they do and helping out as best I could. But like, we were printing graphic posters for the sales reps to be able to put up in their accounts, right? Like, we were organizing that room. We were, coming up with trade programs for like, what kind of food pairing can we suggest for this beer and how can we market that? It's kind of like since you're a trainee and you don't have a specific job at that point, it's a lot of different stuff. And I would say every day is different, which makes it exciting. So I know that the change for this upcoming year, they're going to be in one hub for the whole time. So it might be different cities, but it's going to be one general geographical area. So like I said, the kid that started tomorrow, he said that he got assigned Portland and St. Louis. So he'll start in Portland for 4 or 5 months, I think, do a variety of different roles within Portland, and then I'll move to St. Louis for the last month and do something different there. So I would say there is a typical day, which makes it fun.
I'll just say, for any training programs, like I was part of the people training program, but being in people, I'm familiar with like all the different ones. We have one for like technology, we have one for manufacturing. You will kind of either own a project. So it's not, like whether it's an internship or a full-time, beginning chunk of your full-time job, you're not going to be like running and getting coffee for people and doing that kind of stuff. You will own something, like almost to a point that can be a little bit scary. That's something I like about Anheuser-Busch, is they give you a lot of responsibility really early on, but it's nothing that you're unprepared for. So you're either doing that or you're like all in, learning something, kind of boots on the ground from people who are in it all the time, or sometimes doing both of those things at once. It kind of just depends on what function you're in.
We have another question specifically for Grace. I know Colin touched on the interview process for the commercial trainee program. Is it the same process for the people trainee program? And does that include a case interview as well?
I believe so. So I think this is for every functional training program as well, the global management trainee program too. You'll have the on-grounds interview process where you do a case and behavioral, and then you'll have a final panel interview. So like for people, it would be with like our people senior leaders. But I believe a case is involved with all of them. That might have changed because of COVID and things like that without having people on site, but I don't believe so.
Thank you. And then another student question, is there any way you would recommend preparing for the culture fit and logical reasoning tests?
I honestly wouldn't say so. The cultural and logical reasoning test, so the logical reasoning test isn't anything like crazy. From what I remember, Colin might be able to speak to it because he did it a little bit sooner than I did, but it's nothing like that you need to study for. You're not going to be doing, like calculus or anything like that. And the culture fit too is fairly straightforward. So I don't know if there's anything like you would be able to study or prepare for, except for just like keeping yourself calm and relaxed while you're going through them, which can sometimes be the toughest part, right?
Yeah, I'd say both of those things are, people coming from UVA, that logical reasoning test, you guys have already kind of passed that, like worrying about that. You know what I mean? It's not anything crazy, like Grace said. And then the culture fit one is exactly that. It's a culture fit one. So you can't really study for it. It's just like we talked about earlier, just being authentic. It's not that complicated either. It's just kind of straightforward. You answer like, what would you do in this situation? And then you just select a choice or something, So definitely not a huge pain point in the interview process. Those were pretty quick and painless.
as follow-up about those assessments, for any of our students who have taken Pathway U, as you're taking the interest inventory and personality inventory in Pathway U, that is similar to some of the culture fit assessments with different employers. And if you haven't taken Pathway U, I would recommend that you go ahead and do that, and you can find that at the UVA Career Center website. Other questions?
We have another question for Grace. It says, I know you said that you spent around 30 hours a week working while a student. Given the time commitment, how did you translate the soft skills and leadership roles from work in resumes and interviews?
Sure. So let me know if I'm answering your question correctly, but for me, like definitely was challenging working, you know, while also being involved in activities and, you know, trying to make good grades and learn and everything. But it actually helped my time management so much better. And this is what I explained a lot in the time or in the interview process as well, is, you know, your time suddenly shrinks down and you only have so much time to study or to, you know, complete your assignment. Whereas sometimes, like even before I had a job, I feel like I actually did worse because I had more time. And so I was like, oh, I have 8 hours to study for this test. Let me just go and, you know, get a coffee, or, you know, I'll take this long break. Whereas, you know, when you have a job, you know, you prioritize your time much more. I will say that, like, being a waitress and working at the Virginian too, you're dealing a lot with customer service. You also are, you know, depending on the time of day and night, the customer that you're dealing with can be, you know, very pleasant or sometimes not very pleasant, right? So there are a lot of experiences that shaped me for how to manage conflict, for how to sell things to people and say, okay, this is what you're looking for. So I talked about a couple of those situations, you know, in my interview process. I can't remember exactly which ones, but I definitely learned a lot from that experience. Hopefully that answered your question.
So I want to follow up on that just a little bit. Thinking about if you're looking at a resume, Grace, and thinking about recommendations for students in their resumes, how can they demonstrate on their resume that this is a good fit for them, that working for a particular role, Anheuser-Busch, is a good fit? How do you do that? Yeah,
good question. So what I did on my resume, I think, and what I looked at is, you know, you want to group your experiences that you have to kind of tell a story. And then sometimes people add a little bit of a blurb that will say, like, you know, about me, what I'm looking for. And I'll be honest, a lot of times there are resumes that say about me that's like, I'm looking for something in like the manufacturing industry, or, you know, that gives an understanding. But you really want to tell a story with that couple of sentences, right? So you want to say, you know, I'm looking for a job specifically at Anheuser-Busch because I'm really passionate about the beer industry and how it brings people together and the creativity that goes along with like creating these different products, right? Something like that tells me you've thought about this, right? Like you're being authentically yourself, like me and Colin said, you want to work here, you know, and that would really stand out to me. So if I'm coming to interview you, you know, I'm probably not going to read, honestly, every single bullet point that's on your resume, but my eyes will go to the top and I'll be like, all right, let's talk to this person about their passion for, you know, the industry or whatever it is that you're passionate about.
Thank you.
Great. And one more question for either of you. Since Anheuser-Busch is a national company with tons of locations, how's your location placement decided?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier when I was kind of outlining the program, when you rotate around to these different places, they sort of, you know, you get experience at a bunch of different geographies, but at the end, it kind of comes down to, I really want to do this job, or I really want to be in this place. And not to say that you can't get both, but that's generally, from my understanding, how it's kind of gone for people. You say, I really want to be in New York City, whatever job you guys want me to do in New York City that you think I'm a good fit for, I'll do it. You can probably be in New York City, or you can sort of just pick a location for that. For me personally, I said, I want to be a business analyst, put me wherever I can go to be a business analyst. And that's how I got LA. So they're pretty flexible with that. And like, there is a process during the program where you talk to your manager about it and say, this is why I want to be here or here, and you give them a list and you can rank choices. So I know it's a concern for a lot of people every year, but it works out. I don't know anyone that was super disappointed with anything.
Yeah, again, I think it kind of depends on the program. So like ultimately, you know, when the time comes to like transition out of your rotation and be in like full-time role, you know, there's going to be like a certain number of openings in a certain number of places, and kind of to Colin's point, like you'll talk with your manager and figure out what to prioritize. You know, but I'll be upfront in any program, you do have to be a little bit flexible. You know, but that doesn't mean that, you know, like I moved to St. Louis when I first started. Did I ever think, being from Virginia and living in Virginia the first 22 years of my life, that I would ever live in Missouri? No. It probably was honestly the best place that I lived out of the 3 places that I've moved to so far. So I lived in New York. A lot of people from UVA go and live in New York. And I think I honestly liked St. Louis the best out of that, and Atlanta. So it's definitely like kind of a stressful time. I'll speak from my own experience, and then seeing like other people go through the process of figuring out like where you're going to live and how you're balancing what you want to do with the openings. But like really it all works out in the end. And even if you're in one place that, you know, you don't particularly love right off the bat, like there's so many other opportunities. You probably will do a role for a couple of years, and then if you're saying, all right, you know what, I moved to LA and I was a business analyst, but I want to be in New York City, you know, that's when, you know, the networking happens, and it will come. So trust in that process as well.
Do you all have mentors within the firm who help you with your career trajectory, or who can answer questions for you about the company? How does that work?
So we had mentors within our training program. So I had a guy that was the year above me, like the class before me, that I still talk to him a lot. Honestly, we're pretty good friends at this point. But he was sort of like my guide at the beginning of like, we just hopped on the phone. He's like, do you have any questions about anything? Let me know. And it was super helpful to have someone that was like close enough to my age where it sort of felt like a friendship, honestly, but it was a mentorship, but also had been in the company long enough to sort of know how things worked, right? So I know they do that in all the training programs. I don't know if I think there might be like a more official mentorship program for non-training program things, but I don't know that much about that.
And so I have a couple mentors, not as much from like when I started as a people trainee, but that I've just like met throughout my career too. And I think like probably Colin, same thing will happen for you as you like start to meet people, you identify with people's career paths, with their values, with their expertise. And it's been fairly simple for me, I would say too, like to look at someone and say like, hey, can we just have like one-to-ones every couple of months? Like I want to hear your advice on how things are going. You know, I want to hear your expertise for what I should do next. And, you know, like we've said too, like everyone's really friendly and we'll take you on. So.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, we have one more. Can you talk about how COVID impacted Anheuser-Busch as a whole and work-life culture of the company?
Yeah, so for me, you know, Colin will probably have a totally different experience, but it kind of depends on where you're at. So I work at the brewery in Cartersville, which actually, since we're a food and beverage company, we're deemed an essential business. So I actually never worked from home, never stopped going into work throughout the whole thing. And being in the people department, it was actually like my primary job to keep people safe and to update all of our policies with what was going on with COVID. So at our brewery, we take it extremely seriously just because we have to be at work. So we social distance, we kept 6 feet apart, we wear masks at work. You know, we have sanitation measures and things like that in place. It's affected probably our ability to, you know, have happy hours and things like that and have a lot of people together. But I think it also like helped bring us closer as well, because it was just such a crazy experience. But I know it probably is different if you're working remotely, especially starting out too for a new job.
Yeah, for me, I work 2 days in the office right now. My team goes in on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then the other 3 days I'm remote. And my understanding that before I joined, like before COVID, it was typical to do 4 days in the office, 1 day remote, and you kind of just had a floating remote day whenever you wanted it. But I definitely see, like, we don't have any plans right now to change that schedule of 3 days in, or sorry, 3 days remote and then 2 days in. But I definitely see a lot more teams willing to give you remote work because as a company, we've sort of just demonstrated that we can operate working in a remote capacity for a lot of different jobs. It's obviously different depending on where you are, like Grace said, but in an analyst job, realistically, we could work remote 5 days a week, but we are big on bringing people together and everyone likes to go into the office and see each other and interact. So we try to do it as much as possible. Happy hours, like Grace said, that's honestly like that's a huge part of our company culture too, is like at other companies where you might say someone, hey, want to grab a coffee this afternoon and just talk about something. It's cool too, because we're like, let's go grab a beer. There's beers in the office, like they're on tap, and you don't have to drink in order to network like that, but it's cool that it's that kind of relaxed atmosphere. So there's definitely less of that now because of COVID, but still people find a way to make it work. So not that much different.
Chloe, do you have any more questions that came in? I've got two more.
That was the last one.
Okay, so it sounds like sometimes our students, and you two will remember this, as they're going through the interview process, forget that they're interviewing firms as well, right? To determine if a particular employer is a really good fit for them. So who might do well at Anheuser-Busch? People with what kinds of interests or attributes? It sounds like being entrepreneurial is important. That's just a takeaway from me. So you can confirm or deny that. And what else?
Yeah, so I'd say, like a great point. I think that's something like a lot of people forget too. And like what I talked about with like being authentic too, it goes two ways. For sure. So we're definitely looking for people who, are bold and will take risks. So we're in an extremely competitive market. But also for how big we are, it really feels like a small company. So you'll have a lot of ownership and responsibility. And we definitely want people who are like ready to take that on, ready to have an impact, ready to give it their all, and then work quickly too. So, I'd say that's probably I'd just say like the number one thing or the biggest thing that I would look out for.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that being bold is huge, and that's one of like our 10 principles is related to that. And also, it's one big thing that I hear a lot that people like to reference is never being satisfied with your results. It's one of our principles. Is like people who are always striving to get better, just personally, professionally. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, we have a huge market share. We're the biggest beer company in the world, but everyone still wants to keep doing better, right? And that's sort of the kind of person that would succeed is people that are constantly looking for ways to improve.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so my last question, and anything else from our students? Please feel free to jump in, introduce yourself and ask your question, or I will ask our last question. Okay, what would be some next steps for both of you at Anheuser-Busch?
I'm pretty new in role still, honestly, so I'm still trying to figure that out. I've only been in my current role since March. I've got one-on-ones every month where I talk about this with my boss. Right now, I'm thinking the most likely thing I want to do is go work as a commercial manager. So the way that the alcohol system in the US works is there's 3 tiers to things. So there's the brewer, the person who makes the beer. There's a wholesaler that the brewer sells the beer to. And then the wholesaler then sells the beer to the retailer, like the store, the bar, or whatever. It's kind of just a holdover from prohibition, honestly, that whole system. But what that means for us is that we're only allowed to own 10% of our wholesalers. So we have 10% of our volume that goes to these wholesalers we own. The rest of the 90% we sell to someone else, and they sell it to bars, restaurants, grocery stores, whatever. Commercial manager role is the person that just manages those relationships with those independent wholesalers that we don't own. We try and exert an influence, but because of the laws the way they are, it's just that you're asking for things, you're kind of selling them. I think that would be super cool. Sort of a challenging thing to me of how you try to get them to, align with our goals and sell them on a joint mission. So I think that'd be really cool. It's probably the most likely thing I'll do next.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm coming up on, I've been in my role for probably a year and a half, 2 years now. So trying to figure out what I want to do next. So, right now we've got like some significant changes coming to, our brewery. So trying to do my best to manage that, but probably will end up being a business partner, for, another function, whether it's a craft brewery or a region office, or one of our support functions. Working with more of a salaried workforce would probably be what's next for me.
Rather than the Teamsters and the union negotiations.
Yeah, I honestly love that part of it.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten to work with the salaried employees as much. So want to flex that skill a little bit.
Yep. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Grace and Colin, we appreciate it.